Well, good morning. I'm very privileged here this morning to have as my guests today Scott Henderson and Robert Wagner to talk about the Apollo moon missions, the Artemis moon mission, all things NASA, and all things about theories that are very difficult to provide evidence for. So, welcome, gentlemen. How are you guys doing today? I'll ask you each to just give a very brief introduction of yourselves. I'm going to make a few comments about theories, and then we launch right into what you have to present.
Hi, I'm
Sure.
Scott, and I'm very glad to be here. I'm a professional chef by trade, of course, retired, and I got into the moon landings after watching Marcus Allen in the early 2000s, and I thought it was unusual. I always believed, I didn't think there was anything about that. Of course, I was in high school in 1969 for the Apollo 11 launch. And of course, our teachers and everything else in the high school, they were all avid about it. They were presenting all the MIT documentaries on all the advancements of NASA and everything else being the greatest thing on there. And of course, if people tell you in the 1960s that people landed on the moon and your teachers and everybody else, why would you even question it?
Yeah, exactly.
Like I said, in the early 2000s, well, James Collier was one that I watched, and I thought, gee,
Yeah.
that's pretty incredible. And then I watched Marcus Allen and David Percy and that kind of thing. And I thought, well, it can't be right. So I started to look for myself. And that's when I suddenly realized that there are too many anomalies, there's too many problems, there's too many documents that are just contradict each other even when you're reading them and you see a document that shows all of these problems. Then I started looking for the documents that showed that they fixed these problems, and they don't exist.
And I believe what you did was you looked through all of the photos for the entire series of missions meticulously.
I
Yeah.
had the time to do it.
I don't know anyone else who's done that. I certainly haven't done that, and I would never have thought to do that myself.
I don't think there's anybody alive that has taken the time that I have to look at all of the so called photos on the lunar surface.
That's a mark of great dedication and perseverance and distinction. And we're the beneficiaries of that research.
Well, when you find something that just doesn't fit and things that shouldn't be there, it just makes you want to look at more photographs to see what you can find. The problem is it's not like where's Waldo because you're looking for Waldo.
Yeah,
When you're looking at the document, you have no idea what could be in the photograph. So you spend hours looking at a single photograph.
that's a very interesting point, Scott. You're right. There's not one little puzzle piece that you're on a search for. You're looking at the entire thing and you don't even know what you're looking for. And that takes a different kind of acumen and a different kind of approach, I believe.
What's even more difficult is what is missing. You take the image of Buzz Aldrin in the doorframe.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay, that particular image has been viewed over the last 50 plus years more than 50 billion times.
Jeez. Yep.
And I'm looking at it. Marcus did presentations and everything else using that same photograph. And then Robert and I were sitting chatting, and he asked me for a particular photograph. And that one, just as I was going through it, kind of popped up because it was kind of close to what we were looking at. And I suddenly realized just bang, just out of an instant. And I studied it for hours, that particular sequence. And I'm sitting there and it just struck me. There's the PLS pack right up against the door frame. So what's missing? The console inside has to be missing.
Because it can't fit.
There's something that you can't see that should be in the photograph.
I mean, the general brilliant point, psychologically speaking, goes back to Sherlock Holmes, actually, Conan Doyle, the dog that didn't bark in the night. Remember that phrase?
no.
Right?
Yeah.
That's kind of what we're talking about. You don't even know what's there until you look at it. And actually, this goes back to Freud. I don't know how you guys feel about Freud. I'm a Freudian psychoanalyst and all that.
No, it
Freud,
reminds me of Plato's cave. where he's
Yes, that
staring at the shadows and he doesn't turn around to really notice what's behind him and what's the reality, you
and
know?
they won't even accept the person who's gone up to see what's reality and try to tell them about it. But with Freud,
No.
Freud had a methodology, which is when he wrote his paper on Moses and monotheism, he went and he looked at the statue of Michelangelo's Moses for hours, I think hours and days, until he discovered something in the gesture that led him to write his famous essay. It's the same
Mm.
approach that you were taking with the photos, Scott and Robert. You look at something, you absorb it for hours, and then something strikes you by its presence or by its absence. So I want to say to my audience, that's a fundamentally important point to keep in mind. It's a critical point. There are things you have to be absorbed by and absorb something very intensely and in a concentrated way, really to quote unquote see it and see what isn't there. And this is something that in our age of social media, anything that happens, you get an instantaneous reaction within milliseconds. Well,
It's instant gratification. I
how
mean,
can you
it's
think
instant, yeah.
instant? How can you think about something if you're responding within a millisecond? I mean, you can't do it. I have to say, I want to again make it a point. The approach of deep, intensive study of observation and ingestion of all the material is really critical, and it's going to be a lost art and a lost practice unless we keep it alive. So thanks, Scott and Robert. Thank you. I know you do the same thing. So let's go, Robert. Give a brief introduction to our audience about yourself, if you would.
Well, what I used to do is I started the electrical in 1978 and I went to different colleges. I'm not going to say which ones, university, technical college. And I studied three trades. First one was the electronics, and then the second one was the electrical, and the third one was alarms and communications. And then I did some extra college to get my Microsoft Certified Professional Certificate, and that was the last one that I got was in 1997. So I have
Okay.
four different trades, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
But what I loved doing the most was working in the film business, and it was an electrical company that I used to work for, and Wayne and Danny. Anyways, what they did was we had contracts, or not me, but I worked on, I was the head electrician go in and out of the X Files, the Outer Limits. It was a Gastown film post production in
Oh,
Vancouver.
really?
That was in the early '90s. So yeah, I've been around in the industry. Plus, my family has been in the industry since 1929, which is Charlie Chaplin and Harry Lauder and uh, a cousin of mine, which I'm not going to name, and another famous person I'm not going to name.
That's
But
incredible. Well,
any
that's wonderful. My
yeah.
gosh, that you got that's quite a pedigree. Quite a
Yeah, so you
pedigree.
have on one side of the family, on my father's side, you have one, and on my mother's side, you have the other one. So between the two of them on both sides of it, yeah, it's kind of a crazy, crazy family. But
And Robert, how did you get
yeah,
involved with the Apollo missions and the moon missions, interest in NASA and all that?
well, actually, it was expat Taffy, William Swithin. I was in the hospital getting some surgery done, and I got home and I really didn't have much to watch. So I put YouTube on, and all of a sudden, this guy comes on, and he had a couple of videos out there, and he was talking about the rover tracks and how they're missing and how they come back again and how the tracks are one track and then the track changes to a different one and then the tracks change altogether. And then there's a rover here and well, how come the rover's there and the tracks are there, but they're not over there? And it was like a crane just dropped the rover down onto the set. Then I started talking to Marcus Allen, and then after Marcus, Scott. So then the three of us got together, and then Scott went over all of the images with me, showing all of the garbage, the trash, the engine parts, the man made parts, the car parts, you name it, that was inside of those craters. And it was usually around the rims of the craters, and I couldn't believe it. So Scott pulled out all of the images, and we sat here for at least a good month every single day. Just the
Seriously,
two of us. Yeah,
seriously,
seriously,
my
every
gosh.
single day for hours. But I'm retired, and so was Scott. So we sat here literally for hours. It was 4 hours a day. We sat here for at least for a good
We still
month.
do that every day.
And we still do that
Robert
every
and
day.
I are online chatting every day, looking at stuff, looking at documents, looking at the photographs, and putting the videos together.
I look at both sides of the coin. I don't just look at the hoax stuff. I look at the pros and cons, both sides of it, because you can go into an over-analysis of a situation where you get so blindsided by one single subject on this side of the fence. Now you don't want to go to the other side of the fence to learn what's going on over there in the neighbor's backyard.
Yeah,
And that can get dangerous. So I
that's
like to
that.
keep it balanced. So if I see something that's not right, I'm not going to call it fake right away. I want to wait till all the evidence is in. And this is how we are going to segue into the Artemis II program when we
Well,
get into that. Yeah.
beautiful, because I think that's very important. And we were all prey to our own wishful thinking. And, once we believe we have a conviction about something, then our natural tendency is to push everything into that conviction to support it. And it takes a special kind of person to sit back and say, hold on a second. I've got to be open to evidence that disproves my own conclusions, if evidence
Yeah.
exists. I've got to look at all this stuff. And actually, in the work of an analyst in psychoanalysis, you're doing this all the time. You're getting more information from a patient. You think you may know something, you think you may have a great interpretation, and then a whole series of other things comes out, and you've got to revise everything. So
Yeah.
these are very fundamental aspects of thinking and reactions that I think are very important. I've noted that a lot of people in the so-called, I'll call them the questioning community, people who question things, tend to form a conviction that becomes unshakable in many different areas. And there are a lot of things that you can form questions about and all that. And one, we really have to guard against that kind of self-imposed blindedness when we look at evidence.
You also have to admit when you're wrong too.
Yeah.
That's why I called it the Apollo discussions. I didn't call the channel the Apollo We're Always Right, because there have
Yes.
been many videos that I've had to take down as soon as one of the other proponents comes on the channel and says, well, and I'll just give you a quick example, the Palacia film. A lot of people said that there's a problem with that film, and we had engineers and physicists that were going over the footage. But one thing they made a mistake on, and that was when they thought that the actual separation was at 2 minutes and 3 seconds, I believe it was, but that wasn't the separation of the five engines. That was the sonic cone being ripped away from the craft. And as soon as you get that wrong, now all of your equations are going to be wrong. So I had to take that down once one of the proponents pointed that out. And I'm not ashamed to say, look, I was wrong.
Yeah.
You have to. You don't want to
But
be like NASA and just leave everything up there and say, oh, well, who
you have to
cares?
explain what the Palacia film is.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
the
the
launch sequence of Apollo 11. It was an independent film that was done, not an official NASA one.
Right.
And the frame counts, what, variable and all this other stuff that's in there, right?
yeah.
But people were claiming that it was the full separation when it was just the vapor cone coming off as it's breaking through the sound barrier.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
And they
let,
were
let's
saying
let.
that it was going too slow. But the reason
Yeah.
why, when the physicist did all of the math,
Yeah.
it was going too slow because he didn't take into consideration that it still had another 40 seconds to go before that separation. So, of
Gotcha.
course, now all of your math is out to lunch. So I had to say, well, I can't put that up on my channel. It's got to come down. It has to come down. It's not right.
Well, that's great. Now, that's the kind of thing we have to say. I'm wrong. I am wrong. The
Yeah.
three most difficult words in the English language. I was wrong, or I am wrong. And
Yeah.
we've all been wrong. We're going to be wrong in the future. We're never going to be right about everything. I want to begin and also say that, having a bit of a social media presence or a presence online, the most virulent attacks against, everybody gets attacked by people left, they come out of the woodworks for
Oh,
things
yeah.
you can't even believe. But the most virulent attacks against me have been about the moon. I can't explain it. I mean, I've done a lot of stuff about a lot of controversial things, and I've had my own opinions about stuff, but the moon triggers something that I'm astonished by the virulence with which I'm attacked and told I'm crazy, I'm a narcissistic megalomaniac, all kinds of stuff because I questioned Apollo. I did research not in the order of your research, but in my own kind of research, I concluded that the missions had to have been fraudulent. Work on the handles coming in at reentry and just general psychological things. But I can't explain. I mean, this must touch a button for people that is almost beyond anything else. And I do believe that the Apollo missions are probably the single greatest deception of all time, in our
Yes.
times. It really is. And for all kinds of reasons, it has stimulated such great hope and the pride of humanity and achieve all that stuff. And yet we look back now after 50 some odd years. And when you look at the stuff, given the technology we have now, it's just seems so fake. I'm sorry to say. I know this is not a scientific statement, but it seems so ludicrous.
Yeah, so why would they have all this technology today just as much as they did back then, except of course it wasn't as sophisticated. But a car engine is still a car engine today. You still have the pistons that go up and down on the crank. What I was trying to get at was if they would have had all of that technology that they claimed to have back then, and it functioned the way they claimed that it did back then in the 60s, 69 to 72,
Yep.
then at least 2014, they would have had a moon base up there already because that's what they wanted to do.
Yeah. Right.
2012, 2014, and then they were going to return and keep sending missions up there. And then all of a sudden, oh, we're not going there anymore. Now it's Mars. Well, now we're really getting into fantasy now. Again, the technology just is not there. I don't believe it is yet today either.
Okay. We'll get into that, but I want to make two more comments. One, I do remember expat Taffy very well, actually.
Yeah.
Is he still around?
I
I don't
believe
believe so. I was talking to him, that's more than a year ago. Been in the hospital for about 10 days. And it was the very first time when I was talking to him that he looked very ill. Obviously, he had a heart attack, he had a stroke as well
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
on the thing. And basically, he said to me, if you don't hear from me, I'm basically gone. And I didn't hear from him again.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that, but he was a very lively discussant, as I remember. I mean, he really didn't pull any punches.
No, and you know something? He wasn't the way he was in real life. That was his online persona. But when
Really?
you talked to
Yeah.
him, it
Oh,
was
yeah.
like we're talking now.
Yeah.
He
Okay.
had an online persona
Yeah.
that he was really trying to get under the skin of three guys that were really giving him
I
a
had that
bad time,
impression.
right?
I had that impression, I know. But the other thing I want to say too is the thing even back then, which really shook me. I remember as a kid, I was a boy, like Scott, like you. I believed it. I was on a plane ride to Canada when they supposedly landed on the moon. I'm looking up at the moon out of the airplane window, feeling such, whatever, all grandeur. But when I heard about the golf thing, the golf play, I gotta say, it just sort of jarred me. I thought, this doesn't seem right. Even to a young kid who wanted to believe in all this stuff, it just seems so ludicrous. Why the hell would you go up there and bounce around and act like this is a friendly environment and take all these risks, playing golf? It was ludicrous. And it reminded me, the lunar landscape, the sand, it all just seemed too psychologically implausible. Like somebody was playing a game. Well, they were playing a game, but
Yeah,
somebody was
yeah.
playing a game with us. So that has shaken me. And the bit about the rover, honestly, that car ride, I would bet my life that the Apollo missions never put a person on the moon. I would bet every cell in my body, right?
And not only you, but you take a look at Jarrah White and you take a look at Randy Walsh. I mean, Jarrah, as a matter of fact, it was between Jarrah White's videos and Taffy's videos. I was bouncing back and forth looking at those.
Yeah, I know Jared too.
And
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and then Randy Walsh came along and he
Yeah,
really put a punch into it with all of the math and the illustrations. And then when I got involved with it, then I started doing his videos and we really started ramping the illustrations up a lot. But yeah, Randy, those two books that Randy came out with, Hiding a Hoax in Plain Sight, part one and two, yeah, those books are really going well
yeah,
today.
great. I'm in an appendix in one of these books too, apparently. He's got a whole chapter
That's
for
right.
me. Yeah, so
Yeah, you're in there.
I'm
Yes.
in there. So yeah, Randy's done a great job. And he came to it as what, an aeronautics guy, right? He's a guy interested in flying or
Yeah, he
um
was a flight instructor.
yeah, flight
A
instructor. So
commercial
he
flight. Yeah, he was.
again,
Yeah,
so these are
commercial.
thoughtful people thinking, okay, how does this work? But the greatest argument, as we discussed last time, when, by the way, I want to pay homage to the late Marcus Allen, who passed away just after we had had our discussion together some months ago. And apparently he died peacefully, which is good, but I was shocked to hear that. And we owe him, I've watched many of his presentations, and I've always thought he was really excellent. And he had a great manner. He was always courteous to people. He tolerated the most insane, ridiculous comments with great dignity, and he just offered his material. He was
Oh yeah.
really a mensch, I gotta say. I actually miss him. I'm so sorry to have heard about his passing.
We were here with Marcus twice a week
Yeah,
making the videos since 2018.
it's incredible
So
the ongoing work you've done. And then again, then finally, before I'm sorry, I have all these asides, but if we had really gone in the 60s and 70s, it would not have been so difficult to go back up again in the intervening years with the technology that is, you can't even describe how exponentially different and better it is now. So that has been to people who cost me, I say, well, why haven't they gone back up again if it's so easy? They were going up and back every month, every 2 months. It was another thing, golf, the rover, all that. And now, the missions keep getting put back and back and back, and we have infinitely better technology. So let's segue from there into what you have to present, and then we can take it into the Artemis discussions.
absolutely. First of all, let's take a look at Buzz Aldrin in the doorframe, and then Scott, you can take that part.
Up on the left with a nice big arrow sitting there.
Yeah,
I mean, you can look at that photograph as much as you want from the outside shot, and then you suddenly realize that you never saw a shot of them while they were still inside. They had their cameras with them. But people have looked at this photograph. It's a very famous photograph. I mean, it's put up in museum walls, 12 by 12 and everything else on there. And people look at it. And because they believe that they landed on the moon, they're not going to examine it. Even when I was examining this photograph many, many times and for hours, that never came through. But what is there is the fact that he is occupying the same space as what you see in the center picture.
so explain, is that center picture the doorway?
That's the
Yes.
doorway that they're coming out below, and it's 1 inch below that console, and that console sticks in about 10 to 12 inches. And he can't possibly put his PLSS up against the door frame because the console's right there. There's absolutely nothing. And see, the one on the right actually shows you the dimensions there.
Oh, I see. So the console on the right is where he just couldn't fit through that with the PLSS, correct?
That diagram on the right hand side,
Yeah.
if you turn him around and put a PLSS on that picture, his knees are going to be right up against that wall that comes up about 18 inches before it goes into you see the cover on
Yeah.
the left hand side of that?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the cover of the actual engine
Yeah. Okay.
sitting there. There's only 36 inches there. The PLSS is 10 inches wide. So now you got 26 inches left. The console comes in, let's say it comes in another 10 inches. Plus, it's got handles on it there that make it stick out farther.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But even 10 inches, now you're into 16 inches. And that's all you've got for the width of your body.
I'm going to make a suggestion. I know you're good at this. You should make an animation of an attempt to go through that doorway with the PLSS.
Trevor
And
Weaver
that
did it already.
Oh, really?
Trevor Weaver and his neighbor, they got together, they put on a hazmat suit each,
Yep.
to mimic it. And then what they did was they went into the tool shed, they set everything up to the dimensions, and then they made the door a square,
Yep.
exactly the same. And then they tried to go in and out of that door.
Yep.
And no,
I would love to
it's
see that. If you get a link from us, send it to me. I'd love to see that thing. That would be great.
yeah, and he never
Yeah.
taped it. But I do
Yeah.
have one.
Yeah.
I do have a video of the fella that made the limb, a mock-up of it.
Yeah.
It's accurate right down to the last centimeter. And I've shown that many times of the fella going into that door and then closing it. But he just leaves it open just a tiny little bit. And you could tell there is no way anybody with a backpack could have been in that position because he can't even get in that position without a backpack on.
There are two astronauts inside of that vehicle.
Right.
That door is 32 inches by 32 inches, and the floor that it opens onto is 36 inches wide when it swings inward. One guy has to actually climb up on top of the engine itself.
Wasn't there the issue of the cabin had to be pressurized, right? For the astronauts not to have the spacesuits on. Did they have the spacesuits on all the time inside the cabin of the LA of the LEM? I mean, I know there's some issue about that as well.
They
Well, they
would,
had umbilicals. Mhm.
yeah, like they're
So,
standing up with tethers to hold them in place while they're standing for the rocking of the thing. They're on the umbilicals, which means they're going to have the inner bubble helmet on
Yeah.
yeah.
and the AVI gloves, which is just black rubber that go on there.
Yeah.
Like the other one that slides on is the micrometeor shielding with the big gauntlet that they have on there. But they're still operating that thing, on the landing. If anything like cracked and lost the pressure from the impact of the landing, they'd want to have their full suit on.
Right. Okay. You got two astronauts with these huge backpacks, basically, pretty big backpacks, PLSS backpacks, in this very small space that they really couldn't get in and out of with this equipment and the backpacks.
No, the mock up model that they used to film obviously didn't have any console in there.
Right.
Well, if you take the fact that there's no console, well, you don't need to have an engine either because you can't run it.
Well, no. What's the point? And
Right?
then, of course,
Yeah.
you're not going to have a crater under the engine.
And you can't fire an engine, so there's no crater. So if you go back to the original with Bill Casing, there's no crater. And then you take a look at the legs, there's no compression on the legs.
Right.
And just even the weight of the machine, the documents claim that just the weight of the machine setting down, it's cushioned by crushable honeycomb inside of the legs to slide.
Yeah.
It's going to come down 10 inches, just the weight of the
But
machine.
there's one other thing,
Yeah.
Scott, too. And that
Yeah.
is people are always saying to us about the dust. And they're saying, well, but it's rock underneath there, so it's not really going to do anything. And I say, well, let's just take a look at Apollo 14 and 15 when it took off and they were showing from the inside with the camera out the window. Well, what do we see? We see dust flying everywhere. All the debris is shooting out right across the landscape. The flag gets blown over and all of the foil comes flying up over the window and it continues going out there. So you can't say that there's no dust flying all over the place. That was only a 3,500 pound rocket engine. It was a 10,000 pound rocket engine throttled down to about 75% when they landed. That's a big difference. So, of course, you're going to have a little crater down there.
Yeah.
That's only common sense.
Yeah, not to mention the fact when you look at the bell housing on the exhaust, it's down within a few inches on some of them off the ground. And of course, Apollo 15, it actually crushed it.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
it's actually sitting on the bell housing on the thing, but there's no compression on the legs
No, on all of them,
in
on
any of
any
them
mission.
because the foil is sitting there. It's going to wrinkle down, right? If you're going down 10 or 15 inches of compression,
Right.
the legs are designed to compress 32 inches total,
Right. Okay.
which would mean the bottom rung of the ladder would be sitting right down on the pad.
And we did a video of that specifically showing each and every mission from every different angle on the LEM. this way, sideways, backwards, forwards, from the door side, from the back side. And there is no compression because we had a little measuring tool that we drugged down to
Right.
measure, right? There's no compression. And I don't even mean an inch. Nothing.
And let me ask you about what about Jim Collier? Didn't he climb up into the limb in one of the museums
They
and
wouldn't let him in.
they wouldn't let him in,
Yeah. Well, there
right?
was another
Shoot it
problem though,
because
because he measured the hatch and he measured it because that was a mock-up.
Yeah.
So the hatchway was a little narrower on the mock-up than it was on the real thing. So if he
Okay.
would have measured the real limb or one of the duplicates, but then he would have had an accurate measurement. But I believe it was 2 inches difference. It wasn't that much, but it was
Okay.
still enough where you could squeeze a pack in there.
Right.
it depends on whether the locking collars were in place,
Well, that too, yes.
right?
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
sitting in there and he's sitting down. That's bringing it down to about a 26-inch diameter on the top hatch. And it's supposed to be 30 inches. So there's 4 inches there. But when you take a look at Apollo shooting through there, they're about 4 feet wide.
All right. You got these two astronauts. They have their spacesuits and helmets and life support system. How much space do they have inside the limb? Do they have a, they able to sit and cross their legs, relax? I mean, what was it? How
No,
much space was in the limb, basically?
very
Well, we
little.
see them up on the top, though, when they're sitting up there around on the engine.
Yeah.
That's where one of the astronauts sits, but the other one is down on the lower portion down there. So it's a very tight squeeze. And I don't know even if the astronaut, one of them was up on the top section and the one was down on the bottom. You're still going to need the other one to help you with the pack. You're going to need him to
Yeah.
help you with the gloves. It's a two-man job.
And can you have moved? Could they have moved around inside? Was there enough room to move around and do this?
When Trevor Weaver and his neighbor did it, they couldn't do it. They could not get those hazmat suits off.
Okay. What was the longest mission up there? How many days were they up there for the longest mission? Was it 3 days?
On the lunar
On the lunar
surface,
surface, yeah.
yeah, around 3 days. Yeah.
3 days, okay. So these guys are cavorting in the cars and the golf, playing golf and everything else, and they come back to home base, and they're basically in a very cramped space that affords them very little movement, correct?
When they move from the LEM into the command module to come back, now you're even more cramped. But when they're
No, on the surface, on the
yeah,
lunar surface. When they're on the lunar surface, they're coming back. They have a nice day playing golf, driving the rover. They come back. They want to kick back with a glass of champagne and whatever.
You've
What do
got the
they?
space. One guy has to sit up on top of the engine cowl
Yeah.
that's in there, and the other space is 3 feet wide by 5 feet.
Geez, so you're talking about being cramped into a terrible claustrophobic, terrible space, right?
And they had to sleep in there.
And to sleep in there and in these positions, I mean, it makes no sense. This would be torture. This would be like putting a rat into a box half its size.
Not
Um,
to mention, they have to do all of their bodily functions in there
right.
that length of
Yep.
time,
mhm.
and the air is contained. It's going to be absolutely vile in there.
All right. Well, yeah. When you want to wish to believe something, you don't think about any of this stuff. You just accept it and everything. You don't even think about these things, right? I didn't think about how much elbow room do they have? Could they have crossed their legs? Could they have taken a nap lying back? You just think they're on the moon, they're in the thing, they're back and forth. The degree of the deception is beyond belief, I have to say. It's really beyond belief.
Oh, it is.
Do you imagine if they got a little bit claustrophobic in there?
I mean, what do you
Panic.
do? I want to go out for some, I want to take a walk. I want to go out for some air. I mean, really,
Yeah.
it's so ludicrous. You can't even move. You're going to be,
Uh,
and plus there are medical issues with stasis. If you're static for too long a time, you develop blood clots, all
mhm.
kinds of things. And these guys came back, they were, you know the whole story. I don't need to repeat that.
No. Well, they seem to walk just fine out of the
Yep,
helicopter
yep,
down to the deck of the aircraft carrier. So,
yep.
Here's the other anomaly. If you're climbing Mount Everest,
Yeah.
You have to acclimatize yourself to the air pressure as you're going up. You're spending 8 and 10 days at each of the camps as you're going up there.
Yeah.
These guys went a mile higher than Mount Everest in about 2 minutes at launch. They drop down right from sea level when they're taking off to 5 psi.
And that can't be explained by the pressure that they're pumping pressure into the suits to keep them in
No, the cabin is at 5 psi.
the
Yeah.
cabins at 5 psi.
Yeah.
Yeah, within 2 minutes of launch.
And the normal psi is what? What's our normal psi?
14.7.
So they go from 14.7 to 5 within 2 minutes.
Yeah, which is equivalent to 35,000 feet, which is a mile higher than Mount Everest. Now they have
See,
higher
that's the kind.
oxygen levels that they claim compensate for that.
Yeah.
But altitude sickness can happen to anyone at any time, just the drop in pressure. Then you have the problem with your eyes, with the lower pressure.
Well, let me
It's going
stop
to,
you for 1 second, Scott, because if I'm not going to ever climb Mount Everest, but if I were to do that, even with oxygen, I can't go from base camp to the top of Everest in 1 day if I'm not acclimatized, right? I got to acclimatize in stages to the different.
right.
Okay. All right. So that's important. No matter how much oxygen I have with me, how many canisters, I still need that acclimatization for the blood to be able to adapt to those different environments of less pressure and less, et cetera.
Even the tours in Peru, where they're going up about 12,000 feet,
Yeah.
okay, they still have to bring people down because their bodies can't acclimatize to going up at 12,000 feet.
And we've shown video of that too.
There's no evidence of these guys going into the altitude chambers that would pre-acclimatize them before the launches.
They were in
No.
front of the media the whole time. They weren't doing anything.
Okay.
They weren't going into any kind of equipment that would depressurize them down, and they'd have to be there for 8 to 10 days at a shot.
That's a very interesting angle in all this.
And every time they come back out into normal pressure, basically they'd have to stay in there until they acclimatize to it. They're still stepping out into normal air pressure at sea level to be in that craft.
Yeah.
Well, what about base camp on Mount Everest? I do believe that you
10,000
stay there
feet.
for 5 days every time you go from one stage to the next. You
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
just stay there 1 or 2 days. You stay there to get acclimatized. Then you go up another 6,000 feet, and you go up another. And there's stages that you go up. These guys, they just went and they're gone.
Just flew up. That's the fascinating thing. Let's go into the issue of Artemis. I know, Robert, you got a
Mm.
presentation to make, but before we do that, I want to say when people are doing extraordinary things that are beyond our visual ability and our senses to test, if somebody tells me they just went to the moon, I can't disprove it because it's possible. It's highly implausible that my next door neighbor went to the moon last night. It's short of having a record of his whereabouts. I can't really disprove that claim. He can say he went to Mars for all I know, right? He can say he went to Everest. I know people who've said they've gone to Everest, never went to Everest. And
Mhm.
how can I test that? Well, the usually way we test it is we want to see some evidence, visual evidence that's also been corroborated by somebody else. In the case of the Apollo missions, nothing was corroborated by anybody else. All the evidence we saw came from NASA and came through a single feed pretty much. And
Mhm.
so, we're left in the situation, well, we have to believe what they said. They said they went to the moon. They said they did this. They showed us certain pictures. They said they brought back rocks. Okay, right? What do we do when we approach Artemis? How
Well,
much can you accept? How do you corroborate what they've done? How do you disconfirm what they've done? Is it ever possible? What's our position?
Well, I'll tell you, I have this little presentation here. Reason why I would like to put this one up first is because there are channels out there that have been putting this fake up. And it has to do with the toy that they're using. And on some of them, you'll see that there's words spinning around on the little toy. And it's because they left the chroma key on. It was not on the original broadcast, but when the news agency had gotten a hold of it, they forgot to turn the chroma key function off. So now you're going to have the media down at the bottom scrolling across. And I'm going to just put this little presentation up here to show how I did it. And this is how what happened to these fellows over here. Now, one thing I would like to discuss here is the toy that they are using in the Artemis II command capsule. This happened because the network that was rebroadcasting this, the editor forgot to turn the chroma key function off. And I'm going to make a little video to show you exactly what happened.
So what does this mean? I don't understand what this means, Robert.
So what this means is that the news agency had put this up, and a lot of the flat Earth community were putting this up onto their channels, and other people were grabbing it. They were saying that Artemis is fake and it was done in a green screen studio because you could see the text on that little
Oh,
toy floating around.
I got you. Okay, got you.
You see,
Right.
and the news agency even admitted that, oh, we forgot to turn our chroma key off. So I thought I would just put that explanation in there just to show how easy it is to forget to turn that little button off. And this is what you get when that happens.
That doesn't disprove anything. The fact that they have the letters or whatever, doesn't disprove anything. Okay,
No, what it does is it just shows that people are not doing their research because on the original broadcast, that doesn't happen.
okay,
So I
gotcha.
just wanted to get that out of the way. Now we're
Thank you.
going to have a look at some good stuff. Now, this one is the solar flares. This is what I call this one here, the solar flares. So we'll pop that one up next. Now, there's one question that I have to ask. Why would NASA launch Artemis II when a powerful X1.4 solar flare in the early hours of March the 30th, triggering radio blackouts on Earth and raising potential concerns for NASA's Artemis II mission preparations, launched? The flare peaked at 11:19 p.m. according to NOAA's Weather Prediction Center. It caused widespread degradation of high-frequency radio signals across the sunlit side of the Earth at the time of the eruption, affecting Southeast Asia and Australia. The eruption came from active region 4405, a magnetically complex sunspot group now rotating further into the Earth's view, meaning any continued activity could have more impacts on Earth and Artemis II preparations in the coming days. The flare also launched a coronal mass ejection with a possible Earth-directed component. NASA is paying attention regarding the upcoming Artemis II launch. Solar physicist Tamitha Skov told NASASpace.com in a reply to a comment on X, "We need to pay attention to radio bursts now. Those can really impact HF-VHF as well as satellite radio communications during critical launch operations and early orbit maneuvers. Aurora chasers will also be getting excited about the prospect of possible glancing blow from the speedy CME released during the eruption." NOAA's Space Weather Prediction Center has issued a moderate G2 geomagnetic storm watch for March 31st with minor G1 storm conditions possible on March 30th and April 1st. Now, good people, I ask you, did this make any sense to launch Artemis II on April the 1st? It's up to you to decide. Yes, it certainly is. Now we take a look at another one, and then we can go over this and start to dissect it. But this is a very interesting one here, and the reason why I say that is because it has to do with Mr. Glover here. And we're going to just have a quick look at that one. So here they are on the outside the camera, and we can see them on the inside, but you'll notice something very strange here, because this frame rate is only going at about maybe, 8 frames per second? Now watch this. This is interesting because this is all we get. Now watch the fade. They say that he's going to turn the lights out. But watch this. Watch the man down. Where did he go? See, they put a cut in it. Every time they try to come up to this window,
Yeah.
it always fades or cuts.
Okay.
And there's the earth in all of its glory.
So that crescent is the Earth in the window, that white crescent?
Yep.
That's supposed to be the Earth.
Okay. So, all right. So what is the import of this cutting and whatnot?
Yeah. So what we're going to do next is do the follow-up to this, and then it will explain everything, and then we can go over these 4 to start with then.
Okay.
But this is supposed to be the urine that they let go that's iced up and floating around outside there. Odd, but the sun is below it, and yet the panel is lit up like a Christmas tree.
Yeah, in space it should be like there's no diffusion of light. So we're looking at the dark side of the panel and it's lit up. We shouldn't even be able to see it.
Right. Now this is going to explain pretty much what we're going to get to here. I put this in the editor to show what's going on. You see, this is what they did. They never show just the camera being placed to the window. They always have a cut or a fade. Every single video that you see so far. This is supposedly from the cell phone, okay? So the problem that I have is that they never show just the camera being taken from the hand and being moved to the window without a cut in it.
Okay.
Except they claim it's raw footage uncut.
Precisely. And this other one here will further explain that, especially this one here. And then we're going to get into another one after we just dissect this. But let's watch this. Now there it is. See, there's the window. He's going to bring it up to the window, and then watch what happens here. Here it comes. Wait for it. Wait for it. There. Right there. See that?
Yeah.
Right. Now, I want you to pay attention to the window with all the junk on the window, that urine that was iced up, floated all out, and now it's all over the outside of the window. And pay attention to this. Okay, here. Oh, another cut. Where did it all go?
Yeah.
Oh,
and then there's one more cut after that. There it clears up. Yeah.
There's no way
that cleaned the window off.
Oh, I see what you mean. Okay, so you got this. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, and all of a sudden, instead of just a glowing ball outside the window when you're shooting inside, now you can actually see the clouds on the Earth.
And then we get to this last one here, and then I can put the image itself up over here so we can see what's going on. This is the radiation one. Now, I want to pay attention to this one here because this kind of blows the lid off of it. When it comes to aluminium craft, this is what happens when an isotope, a radioactive isotope, is placed in front of a piece of aluminum or aluminium, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Here goes this one. Now in this example, what I would like to do is show you what happens when you place a piece of paper in front of a radioactive particle. Do we see this paper blocking the radiation? Now watch what happens when he places a piece of aluminum in front of it. The particles scatter, and the radiation count increases. And it keeps increasing. Therefore, since the Artemis II vehicle is made out of aluminum, what protection is offered to the astronauts from this solar radiation when they did not take the astrorad vests along? What protection do they have? Again, that's for you to decide. So again, we have this astrorad radiation, these vests that they were supposed to take along, but then NASA says, oh, don't worry, there's not going to be any solar activity out there. Well, we just read from space.com that there was on the 1st. There was a solar flare, an X-class flare. And Stefan Burns, another channel, he's an astrophysicist. He said that it's going to take 2 to 3 days to strike the Earth. And when we look at the Earth, from what they took from the window, we see the poles, the North and South Pole, are all lit up with coronas because there's activity. All those particles are being scattered and diverted around to the Earth. And yet here these guys are out there in this craft and they say, oh, well, it's just moderate. Don't worry about it. They're not even going to bother taking the vests just in case something happened. They didn't take it. Then they give this other crazy explanation that, oh, well, when I looked up on Google, Google had claimed that astrorad shielding was placed in some of the panels, behind some of the panels. Now, to me, that's the only way they could have got back alive if that stuff would have been in the panels. Because I believe, what was it, Jera was saying this morning, 20 grays per hour or something like that. They're
Well,
sick.
he said it'd be 100 grays.
Oh, okay. Well, if it was 120, whatever it was there. But yeah, that's just ridiculous.
So let me summarize what you're saying. You're saying that Artemis, which was launched on the 1st of April, otherwise known as April Fool's Day,
Yeah.
was launched at a time when there were solar flares that were predicted to occur and that did occur.
The thing is that as we read from here, from space.com, it was April the 1st that this flare went off.
Right.
And that's the day they launched.
The day they launched. Okay. And then your contention is that given that solar flare, they would have been exposed to unbearable radiation without their astrorad vests or other protective equipment.
That's what I believe
Okay.
now. Yes. I wasn't really too sure about it before, but after seeing this and after seeing the fact that no matter how many times I go and try to find video footage of them not cutting in between the window scenes, there, every one you see is faded. And this is, by the way, from the original source. This
Okay.
isn't just from taken off of somebody's channel. This is right off of NASA's channel and space.com. So something is telling me that something is not right here because let's face it, if you're going along in your car and you wanted to take a picture out the window, are you going to take your cell phone and go like this and get close to the window, then, oh, stop, and then put it to the window and then start it up again? See, this makes no sense. They don't have any reason to do that. And there's 16 television cameras in there. Why couldn't they have just turned it around? And when you look in the comment section, even the NASA proponents are saying, please turn one of the cameras around so we could see the Earth and all of its glory. But they won't do it. Why? I don't know. I don't have an answer. I just don't.